My name is Molly. I'm a naturalist with Zionsville Nature Center. And today I am here to talk to you guys all about hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are one of my favorites. And I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. My presentation. There we go. That's better. Maybe. I was going to present it like this. That's not what I want. 1 second. Why is it presenting like this? There we go. Now I got it. Okay. Okay, hopefully. Okay. Oh, yes. Can everyone hopefully see that the whole entire presentation that somehow started at the very end of my presentation? Okay. There we go. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. Like I said, my name is Molly. I'm a naturalist with Zionsville Nature Center. And I'm going to talk to you guys today all about hummingbirds. So hummingbirds are such amazing birds. They're unique, they're tiny, they're colorful. And I'm sure if any of you are checking in on this, you probably have a special interest in hummingbirds like me. And I used to work at a nature center dedicated to birds, and that's kind of all I taught. And hummingbirds was just the one that really stuck out to me. And so I did a lot more research on them and trying to figure out, how to bring them to your yard and all of that. And so I wanted to talk to you guys today all about them and how special they really are. So what is a hummingbird? A hummingbird is obviously a bird. It's some of the smallest birds in the whole entire world. They have these really long, narrow bills, and they drink nectar from flowers and sugar water that we put out into feeders. The males are usually very, very colorful. They are actually like an iridescent color, a lot of them. And it's kind of cool. Their actually closest relative are swifts. So have you ever seen like a chimney swift flying around? They kind of look similar. They're small. They have that kind of torpedo shaped body, and they fly really well. They're like all over the place. And they also eat insects. So kind of interesting how they all go together. And so, so hopefully you guys can see my stuff's in the way for me. There we go. So hummingbirds come in all different shapes and sizes. The smallest one is a bee hummingbird. This guy's less than 2 grams, which is about maybe the weight of a penny. So just imagine holding a penny in your hand. That's how small this guy is. So he's super tiny. Only about 2 1/4 inch long. So this is a real photo of one with a just amazing. Think a hummingbird, a bird is this small. Now our largest hummingbird is our giant hummingbird. Very creative names, right? The bee hummingbird and the giant hummingbird. But this guy's about 8 inches long. This is a photo of one on a hand, and up to 20 grams. So a big difference, and all different, variety of shapes and sizes. So I love this. It's kind of just a GIF of a hummingbird flying, but I want to talk about kind of just the cool facts of a hummingbird. So, well, first off, one thing you're probably noticing is its wings. Hummingbirds actually beat their wings about 80 times a second. This gives them that kind of humming sound that they get their name from, right? So they're humming. But they move in a figure 8 motion, which you can kind of see as this bird is doing in our picture here. He's kind of doing that figure 8 shape. This allows them to fly upwards, upwards, downwards, side to side. They can even go backwards as well. These are the only birds that can actually fly backwards. Other birds can kind of do other motions, but backwards is a pretty rare feat for birds. Now, because you're beating your wings so crazy, so fast, 80, I don't know if I said 80 times per second. So 80 times per second, you're beating your wings. You have a very, very, very fast heart rate. What happens when you run or you do an exercise? Your heart rate goes up, right? Our heart rate has to go up to supply oxygen to all of our body. So when a hummingbird is beating its wings crazy, its heart rate is really, really high. In fact, hummingbirds, this always blows my mind. Hummingbirds' heartbeat can be up to 1,200 beats per minute in some of the species. So 1,200 beats per minute. Us, we're about 70 beats per minute resting. So, I mean, 1,200 beats per minute is phenomenal. So again, when you're moving all the time, your heart rate is going like crazy. It kind of gives you that high metabolism. So that's why our hummingbirds here really drink a lot of nectar and sugar water. When you are moving so much, the only way to get the calories that you need is just straight up drinking sugar. That's the only way. So these guys, not only do they have to just have sugar nonstop, they have to drink nonstop. So hummingbirds actually have to eat about every 10 to 15 minutes to survive. Not to just, be energetic and normal. It's to survive every 10 to 15 minutes. So I just putting it all together of thinking how fast their heart rate beats, how fast they're beating their wings, how much they have to eat is just phenomenal with these tiny little birds. Now, these guys don't just eat sugar water. They also will eat insects, a lot of like gnats and flies and bugs, ants. The reason why you don't see it is because they're eating the insects that are on the flowers. So they're going to a flower, they're getting the insect, drinking the nectar water, and then going on their way. It's kind of neat. Something else with these guys too is because they have to eat so often, you're probably thinking, well, how do they sleep? Because a lot of flowers actually close up at night. So how do they sleep? So these guys actually go through torpor every single night. Torpor is basically the broad term for hibernation. So our hummingbirds literally go into torpor every single night. They lower their heart rate, they lower their breathing, and they do kind of a minor hibernation in a sense every night. And that's how they can survive till the next morning when they can drink flowers. Just crazy. This video, and maybe some of you guys have seen it, is one of my favorites. It's a hummingbird asleep that's snoring. And he's okay. We'll just keep going past that one. Oh, I guess let me go back. There we go. Okay. I just think it's a cute video. Listening to one snore, thinking of like a little cute hummingbird sleeping. So why are hummingbirds so important? There's a couple different reasons, obvious reasons. And I also like to throw in as far as like cultural and history too. All of our animals play an important role in the environment, but I think they play an important role with our lives, each personally. Hummingbirds are really special to me because I've kind of grown and had a special appreciation, from my mom and from my grandma. And I think hummingbirds play a really cool role with culture and history with all of us. And that's probably why you guys are here, to learn about hummingbirds and to kind of, maybe they have a special place in your heart as well. Not only this though, back now into our kind of common things, hummingbirds are a very, very important pollinator. There is several flowers in the world that are only pollinated by hummingbirds. The way that they are formed, no insect can really get to the nectar and to the pollen. It has to only be by hummingbirds. They also are really good with just like pest control, let's say. Hummingbirds can eat up to 2,000 insects and spiders a day. So they're also eating all of the little insects and stuff that might be a bother to us, might be eating, these flowers and destroying them or things like that. But like I said, the flowers are shaped a lot of the times for hummingbirds. And so, in fact, like hummingbirds and flowers have like adapted together in a sense. So originally hummingbirds were like our swifts. They're related to the swifts. So they originally were these birds that would eat insects and fly around like crazy, tiny birds, obviously still. And at some point they started realizing that insects are all by the flowers. So they went all to the flowers. And then somewhere in there, someone tried the nectar of a flower, and it kind of went from there. They started getting quicker wing beats, quicker heart rate, starting to drink more and more sugar water and the nectar of the flower, and kind of changing from just insects to adding that nectar in there as well. And because of that long bill that our hummingbirds have, flowers started becoming that kind of trumpet shape that is perfect for hummingbirds. But something I thought was interesting is that these flowers actually were changing colors to red and orange. And you've probably heard that. If you have a hummingbird feeder, you know that you always have red by it. You have a red hummingbird feeder or something. But it's not just on that. It's not just hummingbirds love the color red. It's actually flowers change to orange and red because insects are red-green colorblind. So they can't tell the difference between a red flower and its leaves. Instead, they prefer yellow and white flowers, but hummingbirds go for the red flowers. So when a flower, like this trumpet flower I have as a photo, creates that tube shape and it becomes red and orange, that's really a way to show hummingbirds like, here I am, please pollinate me. And so that the hummingbirds basically will just do this flower to that flower to that flower and then cross-pollinate the correct way, which would be obviously really great. Oh, and I said they're also good pest control. Yeah. So here is kind of where we see our hummingbirds, which I always think is really neat. And kind of interesting, hummingbirds are only found in the Western Hemisphere. So you're not going to find them in Europe or in Africa or Asia, Australia. They are only found here in the Western Hemisphere. This shows the density of species and what areas they're at. Ecuador is the highest. That's going to be, I don't know if you can see my screen, but Ecuador right there, that red dot in the middle, that's kind of the highest species of hummingbirds in one area. Really anywhere in that tropical rainforest, tropical weather is where you're going to see hummingbirds, the most of them. Because if you think about it, here in the United States and in the Northern Hemisphere, our flowers don't stay out year round. And so when you only have one flower in the seasons, that means the hummingbirds have to migrate. And so if you stay in a tropical area where there is a lot of flowers the entire time, then you don't have to go anywhere. so you can stay. And then that's how you start getting more and more biodiversity and more different species of hummingbirds, which is interesting. So when you think of hummingbirds, you're probably, I know for me, first thing that I think of is just how colorful they are. They come in all different bright, showy, colorful feathers all over the place. In fact, there is over 350 species of hummingbirds in the world. All of them, like I said, found in the Western Hemisphere. So we're only used to a handful of hummingbirds, and I'll get to that. But just even some of these, I just took some random photos of hummingbirds and put them into this so you guys could just see some of the differences. And in fact, with their feathers, another thing I think is really cool with them is that hummingbirds have the most feathers per body size than any other birds. So they have around 900 feathers for their tiny little body. The only exception might be penguins, because penguins have a lot more feathers per square inch of their body, but they're special. But these guys are also the least amount of feathers for any bird, which again, I think kind of makes sense because they're so small. But they're definitely a really cool species, or not species, group, I guess, of birds. So some, like I said, some I'm gonna highlight a couple because I think they're really neat. So the sword-billed hummingbird, this is a really, really unique one. And it has this massive bill. In fact, it's the largest bill to body ratio of any bird. It's so long that this bird can't preen itself. It has to use its feet to like scratch its feathers and preen itself. And the reason why it has such a long bill and beak is because it lives in those high density areas where there's so many hummingbirds, and it needs to compete with that. You know, flowers don't instantly get nectar. You know, they don't, in 2 seconds, the nectar is refilled. And so there's only so many flowers out there. So if you're looking at 5 flowers and there's 10 hummingbirds, you don't have a good chance of getting that nectar. So instead, this sword-billed hummingbird has adapted to be able to drink nectar from the really, really long tubular flowers, like this one in the picture too. And why that helps the flower is because then our swordbill, he's only going to those same flowers. He's not going to that flower, and then he's going to a different species of a flower, and then to another species of a flower, and not cross-pollinating. He's going to the same species of flower every time. And so they've kind of both changed to work with each other. And so there's not a lot of competition then. No other hummingbird can get nectar from that flower, just our swordbill, which is really neat. Another one is our white-tipped sicklebill. This is also that same thing. It has that special bill that matches, it's actually this flower in the photo that's curved, and that gives it kind of the exclusive right to that flower. No other hummingbird can reach into that flower to get the nectar. And so this bird gets its whole, you know, exclusive bounty of these flowers by himself, which is really neat. There's so many different kinds of hummingbirds that are just like that, which I think is really fascinating. So again, I talked about their feathers. This one's great. I love this. Just how he moves. He's so showy. It's like, it reminds me of like a butterfly, I think. When the butterfly just opens its wings, it's bright and colorful. So, like I said, hummingbirds have adapted this really iridescent feathers to really show off. And what this is actually to flash a warning to other hummingbirds in the area. I don't know if any of you guys have heard, but hummingbirds are very, very aggressive and territorial. And this all again stems from wanting the exclusive flowers of the area. So if there is like 5 flowers and 10 hummingbirds, you're going to need to be able to step up and fight your way to get to the flower. And so these guys not only fight and will attack each other all the time, but they will actually lay claim to an area and be really territorial. I don't know if any of you guys have feeders at your houses, but you've probably seen some of your hummingbirds like chase off other hummingbirds. So it's definitely it's definitely interesting that these tiny little birds are so territorial and aggressive. They've actually been seen attacking like hawks in the area. They're in their territory. They've attacked fake hummingbirds before. They need their flowers. You know, they have to drink every 10 to 15 minutes, which is a lot. But like I said, they have this bright, showy feathers to really show off and warn other hummingbirds. So when they have that territory, they're going to turn their head, and just like this guy does, you see when the other hummingbird comes up, he turns his head and flashes that color, which is to chase him off. So, or he's doing that to Karen maybe. So as one comes up, I think right around now. Okay. Oh, there he goes. So showing off that color to him on his face, saying, this is my territory. And when he turns away, he kind of almost blends in. So they're still the smallest animal, smallest birds. They still are going to get possibly attacked. Something else that I thought is one of the most interesting things with hummingbirds. It's my favorite fact to share with people. Hummingbirds are actually very, very, very smart. They have the largest brain size to body ratio. They have a lot of I can't think of the word. A lot of like world records, I guess. But they have the largest brain to body ratio than any other bird. That doesn't mean they're the smartest, but it means that they put a lot of kind of the adaptations of them into their brain size and stuff, and to make them smart. The reason why they do that is because, again, they have to eat every 10 minutes. So they need to know where the flowers are. They need to know how long it's been since they visited each flower. And they need to know how long it's going to take each flower to refill its nectar. So they remember every single flower they have ever visited, even on their migration route. They know where they can rely on flowers or feeders, and that's where they'll stop. So if you have hummingbirds that come to your yard and they are your regular ones, I guarantee if they're not back yet, they will be coming back and they will come right to your feeders. It's the same ones because they know and remember that's where the feeders and the food is, which is cool. But not only that, is they actually have facial recognition. They know who you are. And so if you are the one that goes out and fills the feeders every day, they know your face and they know they can count on you, which blows my mind. I have told this to a couple of people, and they have told me that they come outside to hang out or fill the actual bird feeders, and they get buzzed by a hummingbird, just constantly in their face, all over the place. And they look over and the hummingbird feeder is empty. So these hummingbirds are literally telling these people like, hey, feeder's empty. You need to feed the food. I need some sugar water, which is just so cool. So next time, if you do have bird feeders out and hummingbird feeders, maybe keep an eye on them. If they come up and start buzzing you, maybe they're trying to tell you something. So going back a little bit, again, there is 350 plus. I mean, it's hard to tell in the rainforest. I think there's a lot of animals and plants that we have not identified yet, insects. But right now it's about 350 plus species of hummingbirds in the whole world, all in the Western Hemisphere. Of those, 23 are in North America, which includes Mexico. So that's probably the majority of them. 15 go into United States regularly, not just a random visitor, but 15 are around here. And then of that, we have one in the Midwest, just one. As I go to, I like to talk a little bit too, because when I looked at this map, I was confused why there was a big hole in the United States where there's no hummingbirds. So I looked it up. This is actually a lot with the Rocky Mountains that are right there, but it's also the plains of like, think of like the Badlands and really big empty fields where there's not a lot of flowers or trees. So that's why there's not many hummingbirds, if any, really, in those areas, because there's no good nesting spots, no good flowers that are consistent. Weather's kind of strange. And so that's why there's a big gap there. There's also a gap in Florida. That little tip of Florida is actually a migration route. Hummingbirds will come there temporarily, but for the most part, it seems like they kind of nest around the coast. You can see the edge line around it. But for the most part, they are just there when they visit. So that one in the Midwest, that is our ruby-throated hummingbird. This beautiful bird. This is the male. He has that bright red throat. We see these all over Indiana. Going back to the map, he's basically all of the east coast of the United States. So again, talking about their migration, our ruby-throated hummingbirds, they breed here, they migrate through, and then they go down to Mexico and a little bit down, it looks like, in Florida as well. The migration is fascinating, I think. So every August to September, the hummingbirds start moving south. Males are always the first to leave, always. Males are just like, no, I'm done, I'm out. Then the immatures and the females go. I like to think as the females are making sure the kids can figure out what they're doing and to get out. I think the females also are kind of busy during the summer, and I'll get to that next. But in the March, they start coming back. So the males come first because I think they're ready to come up. Males also will start making claim to their territory first too. And so they come up basically as soon as they can. As soon as it gets warm enough for any sort of flowers and insects, they make their way up. You know, some of them even can reach Indiana by early April. So they definitely are coming up close. Now, when they go down and up, there is this, it's kind of been believed or taught that hummingbirds fly, or ruby-throat hummingbirds, fly like 500 miles nonstop across the Gulf of Mexico. They do it in like, I don't know, like 16 hours or something like that. That sounds amazing. It sounds really fascinating. And I think there are some hummingbirds that do that, but they don't need to. So they don't, for the most part. They've been tracking hummingbirds and using different websites like eBird to look at reports of where they've been spotted at. And using all of that, they realize they can make stops along the way. They've been seeing oil rigs in the middle of the Gulf. They'll stop there for a minute. They'll stop at all the tiny little islands. If you look, Cuba is bright yellow. That is a huge stopping point for hummingbirds as they make their way to Mexico, and all of South American countries too, not just Mexico, but that is another spot that they stop. So yes, some might cross it straight across, but for the most part, it's easy to find spots to stop along the way. Some also have been seen to hug the coast, going all the way down, because like, why not go along the coast of Mexico? I'm sure there's plenty of flowers and insects to eat. Still though, to do this, Our hummingbirds have to double their weight every single fall. So I like to tell people in late July to August and September, I guess, just constantly be watching your feeders, fill them as much as you can. A lot of our flowers are starting to die back, but hummingbirds need the food. So that's probably the most important time is to put your hummingbird feeders out is in that late summer, early fall, for sure. So talking about all of this though, why are the females last with immature stuff? So like I said, females are busy in this, oh, I went too fast. Sorry. I forgot I just added this slide. So another thing with migration, you can also track our ruby-throated hummingbirds with this website. It's hummingbirdcentral.com. You can also just Google ruby-throated hummingbird migration, and I'm pretty sure this is one of the first ones that come up. These little red hummingbirds are sightings, and they keep track of them, and they update this map weekly, daily probably. And it's really interesting. If you click on any of those, it'll tell you where and the details and what people saw and the date and all of that. So you can kind of watch our hummingbirds move back. It's one of my favorite things to do when it's March and it's snowing for some reason. And it's just, or maybe it's rainy and cold. And summer's just not quite here yet. You can go onto this website and just watch our hummingbirds and realize, oh, they're in Kentucky. So, you know, they're coming close. This was actually taken, I took this picture of last week. So our hummingbirds are here for the most part. They're kind of scattered. These are early males that are here probably right now, and everyone will be here probably. This cold weather might pause them. I would imagine next week we'll start seeing even more hummingbirds. Okay, now again, going into our females, what they're doing every summer. So this is a female ruby-throated hummingbird. As you can tell, she doesn't have that bright red neck. She is the one that does everything by herself. It's actually kind of uncommon for our bird species for the males not to do anything. There is some species, but it's rare for, like, I think birds in general, that the males don't help at all. So really the male, and I think it's really interesting too, when they kind of go to mate, the male really wants to show how great he is. So he's going to show obviously his bright colors, his bright red neck, but he's also going to do is show his endurance. So I should have put a video in here, but I forgot. But what the ruby throats do is they actually go to the female who might just be sitting there, and they fly this big U shape back and forth. Like, I've seen him do it for like 30 seconds or more. And it's to show how big of his endurance is. It's, you know, he's like, hey, I don't need to eat sugar water. Look how good I am, and how, you know, it's like one of us humans running a marathon and being like, look how strong I am. So it's similar with that with our hummingbirds, is they like to show off. They're saying, look how strong I am, look how long I can fly, and look how these cool dance things I can do without needing to take a break, without needing any sugar water. So it's a way to kind of impress her. So after that, though, his part is done and he goes off and he basically lives his days drinking sugar water and eating insects and doing whatever he wants to do. Yeah. Meanwhile, the females, they make the nest and they raise the young by themselves. They do it all by themselves. So again, going back to how smart they are, it said that young females have been seen watching the older females, more experienced ones, make nests to really see how you do it, which I think is fascinating. But they also, what I think is really neat, and you can kind of see in the photo, so they use lichen on their nest. It's these little tiny bird nests, and they make lichen all around it, but they use spider webs. And I they're like engineers. They find spider webs and they create their nest with that. Because one, the spider webs are sticky, but then they are stretchy. So as the baby birds get bigger and bigger, then the nest stretches out, which to accommodate them, which I think is just so cool. I think this is also because she's the one raising the young. This is why she's the last to leave. The females and the young are the last to leave because I think they're behind with everyone else. The males are like, okay, I'm enjoying the warmth. Oh, the flowers are kind of disappearing. I'm gonna go down to Mexico for the winter and hang out. And I think the females are still trying to take care of the young and making sure the young know how to get to Mexico. So that's just their little thing about them. So it's to my last part of the talk, and that is how to attract hummingbirds into your yard. I don't know if any of the people watching right now have hummingbird feeders up already, but it's not very hard to attract hummingbirds. And then, like I said, you normally keep them because they create that territory. So the first thing is the plant native flowers that would attract our hummingbirds. So any trumpet shaped flower, anything red and orange and purple, they absolutely love. There's a trumpet creeper vine, which is a huge one for hummingbirds. If you have a wet area, the spotted jewelweed or touch-me-not jewelweed is a really great one as well, especially because it blooms in the fall or the late summer, which is when they need all the nutrients. Cardinal flower, bee balm. There's so many different kinds of native flowers to attract hummingbirds that they love. But again, please plant native because there is other purple red flowers that aren't native and then they become invasive. So really try to stick with these native ones. I also like to say to arrange your plants so the flowers really stand out and they're not just like covered up and hidden by grasses and other bushes and plants. That's another way to kind of really highlight that red bright flower. Next is to just put out that sugar water feeder, your hummingbird feeder. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slide, but that's going to be a big way to get them to your yard. When I first moved into our house that we're in now, obviously there was no hummingbird feeders or bird feeders. I put a hummingbird feeder up and I think it took less than a week to get my first hummingbird on there. So they will find it very fast. The next is just to really provide habitat for our hummingbirds. So having native bushes and shrubs with a lot of perching habitat is great for them. They need to be able to rest. Occasionally they'll sit down. Might not seem like it. If you ever watch a hummingbird, it's rare to see them actually sit, but they do. They love to nest on really thin branches of like dense shrubs and trees. So again, if you're planting these bushes and shrubs, be really careful with pruning them because again, they like to be on normally on the edges and the really thin twigs of them. Things they like to nest on is like maples, oaks, poplars, pines, cedars. Dogwood is a really good one if you can get that in your yard. Red bud trees, spice bush, all of these are really great shrubs for not only perching, but also nesting, which is great. And then finally, on my last slide that I have, I believe, yes, our hummingbird feeders. So these are really easy. You're gonna find a million different recipes online, a million different opinions. You know, it really comes down to just keeping things really simple. 1 part sugar, usually cane sugar, just simple sugar, real sugar, and then 4 parts water. With that, you can combine the sugar and water, boil or just boil. I've also heard like don't completely boil it to where the water is evaporating, but boil basically until the sugar is dissolved, and then let it cool. obviously. It's boiling water. So let it cool all the way down so our birds can drink it. And then you just place it out and that's it. Do not use red food dye. That's a big thing that people will say. Or if you go to a store, they're gonna sell a bottle of red food dye. Don't use that. The red food dye is synthetic and it's not good for our hummingbirds. It can make them really sick. They do not need red in the sugar water to attract them. Any hummingbird feeder that you buy at a store is going to have red on it, just like the one in our picture here. That's enough. That's all they need. They just need a little bit of red like that and they know what to do. There is enough hummingbird feeders out there in the world that I think hummingbirds, as smart as they are, understand that is for them. And so you do not need red food dye on it at all. The last is just to replace it every 2 to 3 days, or basically when it gets cloudy. That cloudy is the mold. And so you do not want to be giving anyone, any human, any animal, any bird, moldy food. So I know it seems like a lot, changing it every 2 to 3 days, but if it does get moldy, especially in that hot summer sun, it'll make our hummingbirds sick. So another thing too with this, I always tell people if you're watching that migration map, yes, we sometimes get hummingbirds, 1 or 2 at the beginning of April, but those are just the very first few. I like to put my hummingbird feeders out mid-April. So if you haven't yet, this is a great time to put out hummingbird feeders. You can also put them out in the middle of summer, in the fall, anytime. It's probably the best then to remove them in probably late October. It kind of depends. For the most part, the hummingbirds have left by October. Some people keep their hummingbird feeders out and then they all winter long. And very, very rarely you'll get some unique hummingbird like the Rufius hummingbird who's not from Indiana normally, but they migrate and then they find this one person's feeder that's out in the wintertime in Indiana. And that's really rare though. So I would just keep it out for the most part, early mid-April, maybe take it out by October. Pay attention to the weather. Our weather's getting kind of strange and it's staying warmer for longer. That might mean a shift in hummingbird migration. They might stick around for a little bit longer if our flowers are still blooming. But again, when insects disappear and the flowers are disappearing, it's a very good chance that our hummingbirds have also left. But yes, so that is about all I have for us today. These birds are so special and unique, and I know they hold an important spot in my heart, and just getting to know them and watching them and learning about these cool things about them is just amazing to me. And so if you guys have any questions, you can put it on the chat and I can answer your questions or anything. And if not, yeah, probably good. Any questions at all? You guys are also welcome to, those who are in my Zoom call, I emailed you guys, you're welcome to email me or stop into the Nature Center at any point as well to talk about hummingbirds. I will always talk about hummingbirds. So that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. Okay, bye.